My name's Peter Torias, and I'll be reviewing Shining in the Darkness for the Sega Genesis. There have been lots of difficult games in my life. Shining in the Darkness was the bane of my 16-bit era experience. A Sega Genesis game that was part dungeon crawler and part JRPG, Shining also happens to be one of the hardest games on the system. This was largely due to the relentless enemy encounter rate and the central dungeon, a complex labyrinth that's easy to get lost in. At the same time, it was a compelling fusion of earlier Western-style RPGs like Wizardry and gorgeous JRPG art that made it feel like a fantasy anime come to life. I couldn't stop playing it when it came out. And warning, there's going to be lots of spoilers throughout this review. Developed by Sega CD4, the narrative mimics a play in many ways, with the game taking place through a first-person perspective. It's as though you, the main character, are interacting with a live set. Shining even starts like a storybook with an old wizard walking you through the first steps before the game opens up in the throne room. Similar to a drama, the story is split into comedy and tragedy. The throne room represents the more serious elements, with the king and his advisors debating the crisis racking the kingdom of Thornwood. Narrative-wise, fantasy tropes do abound, like the fact that the princess has been kidnapped by the evil sorcerer, Dark Soul, and it's your job to rescue her. Your father, who is charged with protecting her, has also gone missing. It's the character interactions and the way people respond to your actions that makes the game so interesting. The NPCs in town represent the comedic half of the drama, providing lighthearted interactions. Their dialogue changes after every major event, and I appreciated how they comment on your actions and share gossip with you at the tavern, making the journey feel more personal and grounded. Even the merchants feel dynamic as their inventory grows and special items become available. In a neat little Sega Easter egg, the salesman at the weapon shop appears to be Gilius from Golden Axe, though his expression of shock when you buy something is pretty hilarious. Once your armor is equipped, players can enter the convoluted path of the labyrinth. The labyrinth is cruel and merciless. Even though it has a unicursal objective in Dark Soul, it is multicursal in its complexity, with treasures to aid your quests scattered throughout. But it won't be easy to get to them, as there are areas where almost every step results in a random battle. Grinding becomes unavoidable in corridors that seem interminable. Every turn leads to another hallway full of enemies. Fortunately, one aspect that makes this bearable is the bestiaria foes that number over 100 and comprise of some of the quirkiest and unique designs among 16-bit JRPGs. The labyrinth itself feels alive and ominously ancient. The walls reek with a bloody history, and altars intimate an epic struggle in the distant past. I wondered where the labyrinth came from, who built it, and where all the beasts originated. Once you get it through a good chunk of the first level and defeat the enormous Kaiser Crab boss, two new members join you. Pyra, a wizard with strong offensive spells, and Milo, a healer who, defying the normal clerical trope, can fight. After spending the first few hours by yourself, struggling literally to take another step, their presence changes the entire dynamic of the game. The journey doesn't feel as desolate and isolated, and their presence in battles go a long way to easing the load and making fights more manageable. They also add a strategic element as the enemies get tougher and they gang up in you in larger numbers. Shining wasn't going to get any easier. There are obstacles everywhere, from trap holes in the ground that'll drop you to a lower floor, to spinners which you have to properly traverse as they swing you around to get to the next section. A pond even gives rise to deadly seahorses, the walls come alive with monsters that have mouths on their palms, and even treasure chests attack you. Special items unlock new sections of the labyrinth akin to a Metroidvania-style game. The mystic rope lets you climb up those trap holes, and special keys open up different parts of the labyrinth. There are small sections where you traverse the external wall, and those are in bright sunlight, beautiful respites where even the music offers solace before thrusting you back into the fray. Shining does try to make the experience a little less painful by giving you a medallion that allows you to start at higher levels in the labyrinth, as well as a view spell that shows you a map of where you're at. There were so many times I felt helpless when I was originally playing. I was 12 then, so there weren't any FAQs online I could consult. I searched every corner of the labyrinth, even though I had no idea where to go. I persisted, mainly because back then I didn't have anything else I could play. Any game I bought was going to be it for the next year or so. It took me months of leveling to finally be strong enough to overcome the 4 trials and find Princess Jessa. That forced me to fight the character's father, Mordred. The battle against the Dark Knight is a tough one. After his defeat, you learn one of the king's advisors, Melville, gave him the Darkblade. Melville seems like a weak apprentice, but secretly has been studying the dark arts. In the game's big twist, he's Dark Soul, and the sword he gave your father corrupted him. Your father is liberated from his curse, but dies from the wounds you've inflicted, resulting in a bittersweet victory. I had overcome the trials by killing the very person I was meant to save. The most disturbing aspect of the game's narrative is when you finally confront Dark Soul, he reveals he's been looking forward to the fight because he's been bored. The entire game takes place because no one was left to challenge him. My 12-year-old brain started wondering to myself, after all that Melville had achieved in its path to power and darkness, not to mention the sacrifices he made, the ultimate result was monotony? He was just too dang powerful. But how had that twisted him? Was his pursuit of that evil ultimately a wry commentary on the meaninglessness of his endeavor? I was confused, but also a bit irked. Equipped with the most powerful gear, the battle was almost anticlimactic after the torturous labyrinth. After defeating Dark Soul, the camera pans up to an azure sky, the light actually beaming down. A touch melodramatic, but so very satisfying. It was one of the most proudest moments of my young gaming career. In the final scene of the game, the old wizard closes the book, sits down and states, "It's sad that I must bid you farewell, but I'm sure we'll meet again." Revisiting it all these years later proved the wizard right, and reminded me that completing Shining in the Darkness will always have a special place in my heart, not just for its difficulty, but its unique take on JRPGs that are as complex as the labyrinth at the center of the game.